Hey there YouTube, we're back with another video. Today we're going to be doing an oil pan gasket change for our Integra. Basically the same for every kind of B series that's out there. We're utilizing the Permatex or the Perma-Dry Plus from Felpro, which instead of having just the rubber gasket like the OEM gaskets have or the aftermarket ones normally do, this has a layer of rubber, then metal, and then rubber again, and it comes with a few extra goodies in the bag. So we're going to go home and unbox this and show you guys exactly how to do this at home. Alright, let's take a look at this outside real quick. Part number's right there, oil pan set, and I'll put a link in the description along with the part number itself. That way you can save it if you choose to go this route. Here is the gasket pulled right out. And if you see right in the center, so my phone will focus, there's that metal layer that I was saying. It goes right along the center of the rubber. Take a closer look at it. Has the guided holes along with metal on all parts of it, and if you feel it, it just feels really sturdy. I've seen this style used for other cars on other parts of the car, oil pan included, but they seem to hold up a lot better than the original manufacturer's type. Up to this point, I've always recommended to use the OEM Honda gaskets, but after doing this, I hope to convert to it, since it'll be more widely available than having to go to a Honda dealership and rely on parts that aren't really made as much as they used to be. I noticed this came with it. Just from the looks of it, I want to say it's like guiders for it. Let's see the back, what it says. Install snap-ups to engine block, right there. Step 1, install snap-ups to engine block, which I'm guessing is that. Snap gasket over snap-ups, install oil pan over snap-ups, install oil pan bolts, and then remove snap-ups, install 4 corners and bolts, and tighten to desired torque, which on this is like 8 foot-pounds or something. So essentially what it's saying right there, you can see right here, let me open it up real quick. Alright, so this is going to thread into the engine block. Then you're going to put your gasket over it, right over there. Then this is going to squeeze so the gasket can go over. Then you'll install your oil pan over it, and I guess that'll hold it in place. That way it makes it a lot easier on you, since you don't have a second hand, if you don't have a second set of hands with you, sorry. So that looks like it'll be very helpful. Apart from that, I think it came with something else. There we go. A black RTV silicone. Most people say don't use silicone when you're using, or any type of RTV when you're using a gasket, and 9 times out of 10 it's true, because it will damage the sealing surface, or it won't create the perfect crush that the rubber gasket is supposed to create. But on this engine in particular, you want to put a little dab of RTV where the oil pan meets with the engine block and with the oil pump, and I'll show you as soon as I have this up in the air. I'll show you exactly where I'm talking about. Since this is an aftermarket Felpro item, it's not going to come with the OEM RTV that's recommended. I always like to recommend Honda Bond. You can pick this up at your local Honda dealership. I think it's like 13 bucks or something, but this is the best RTV that I've ever personally used, in my point of view, of course. This and Ultra Grade Permatex is absolutely wonderful. So you can either use this or whatever you really have handy. Totally up to you. I personally think I'm going to be using the Honda Bond just because peace of mind. I always like to use it. It's just a great sealant. You can decide to do whichever you want to do. First thing we're going to do, we're going to pull the car a little bit in. We're going to lift it, and you should know how to use a jack. If not, just find the safe lift points for your specific make and model, and then put jack stands underneath the car, because you always want to have your car supported correctly. We're going to go ahead and lift it and then show you what to do next. Okay, once you have it in the air, you're going to want to make sure that the engine cools down, especially because you're going to be working with a little bit of the exhaust and the main engine itself. So make sure it's nice and cool, especially if you just drove it. And in my case, I'm not really going to wait. I'm just going to wear gloves and hope I don't get too burned. If we come below the car itself, we can look at the engine right now, and you can see the oil pan itself is drenched with oil, and there are no other leaks in the car. There's a few other ways to see if the engine pan is what is leaking. When I park it, obviously you can see all the drips come off of it, but as long as you know that it's coming from the oil pan, I mean, That's pretty much the only place it'll come from. Okay, so now what we're gonna do, we're gonna go ahead and loosen this drain plug right here, 17 millimeters bolt. And first we're gonna get our oil pan, drain pan, whatever, that thing right there. We're gonna make sure everything falls right into there. That way we don't have a mess everywhere. Now that it's draining, we're gonna give it a minute. Come up top and take off the fill cap. That way it can vent a little bit. While that's draining down below, we're gonna go ahead and start up here. We're taking our exhaust shield off right now. 12 millimeter bolts. There should be 3 or 4 of them. I only have 3 right now. 1, 2, the third one is right here. And this is why I always tell you to make sure that the car is cooled down, because I don't want you to burn yourself or just be stupid like me and start doing things while it's hot. Got the 3 bolts. Now wearing my glove. I'm gonna take this off right there. Wiggle it off, and there you can see the 4th bolt hole that I didn't have put on. So now that that's exposed, this you really want to make sure that it's nice and cool, because this itself gets really hot and retains the heat. But it's 12 millimeter bolts and nuts, combination of the both, all across. You're gonna start by taking off your dipstick tube, setting this off to the side, put that right in there, and you're gonna start loosening it. There's another method to do this, which is taking off the bolts that connect the top half of the header to the bottom, but most of them are rusted and will break as soon as you take them off. So this is what I recommend right here. Start loosening the 12s, and I'll show you once this header is off. I like to remove all the bolts first and then get the studs with the nuts, since that supports it while I loosen everything else. So now I'm gonna loosen these 2, and this should be able to move freely off. Well, it'll have a little bit of tension there because it's still attached on the bottom, but we want to get the top undone first. Can you hear that? It's almost like a crackling. That would be the exhaust gasket undoing itself. Well, not undoing itself, but losing its tension. It's basically a crushed metal gasket, sometimes a multi-layer gasket that goes right there. And as soon as you remove this, the tension is lost, or the clamping tension. Some people get away with using the same one. It's really up to you. If you have the means, go ahead and replace it. Doesn't hurt to have something new in there. Just so this little something you can know. Now that we have everything loosened up top, we're going to come to the bottom, put our drain plug back in, so we can work on the bottom without having drips of oil. It just goes right back in, thread it in, and I'll move this out of the way. There we go. And we are going to be loosening now these 2 bolts that connect the header to the rest of the exhaust. As you can see, this is the header that we've already loosened. It's a 12 millimeter right there, 12 on the back. And some people change these out over time. This is an old car, so it might not be OEM. So just loosen this right here. And as soon as that's done, you're gonna unplug the O2 sensor, which is right there. Just a little clip up here. And that will be free. And this will just pull forward and drop down. Sorry, it's actually a 12 on one side and then a 14 on the other for the OEM. And on the other side, I just had a 12 and a 12. Which you shouldn't use. You should use the OEM stuff, but it's what I had. Now I remember that. Okay, once the bottom is loose, the top should just pull forward. And this will drop down out of the way. Just kind of have to wiggle it through. And I'm going to put my phone down and actually do this with my hands, both hands. But you can fit this down, and let's see if I can get it. Right there, it's catching on the AC compressor bracket. Let me go from the bottom, and using both hands, I'll actually take it off. Okay, there we go. Once that's off, you're going to want to set this to the side. And we can start working on the bottom. Just to show you, this is the crush gasket, metal crush gasket I was telling you about. Right over there. Okay, let's go over and start working on the oil pan itself. Now that I have the exhaust out of the way, you can see a little more in depth where the oil pan gasket leak actually was. Well, it seems to be around the seal itself, but it's carrying down over here, carrying onto the flywheel or flex plate cover, and continuing all the way over here, and it's dripping even all the way back to this area. So this is why my driveway was full of oil. What? We are going to fix that immediately by starting to take this off. You see over here we have a whole bunch of 10mm bolts along with nuts, and all around we are going to just zap those away. I like to use my little impact with this just to get them out faster, but just go ahead and zap them all off, or use your ratchet if you have to. And since it was leaking a lot of oil, a lot of gunk and dirt and debris built up around the block, as you can see, I'm starting to spray it off, and a lot of it is coming off. So you're gonna just essentially do that until you know there's little to no risk of contamination from something else. You see how it's already a lot cleaner. Just go ahead with some brake clean, do that type of thing. I have most of the bolts off. I had to take off the little shield as well that covers that flex plate right there. Or on the manual transmission versions, you have a very similar plate, just a couple 10s and a 17. And now I just have it being supported by 2 bolts right here, 1 right there. I'm gonna take the 1 over here and then hold it with my hand, take off the last 2 bolts, and lower the pan evenly. There we go. Just bring this down. Let's take a look at it. A little bit of oil is dripping, but it's no problem, we'll clean it up later. Look at the oil pan right now. Well, the gasket, it's pretty much sealed onto the pan itself. You can already see some deterioration on the edges, but it's a regular wear and tear item. These things tend to go bad after some time. Maybe it cakes on, or there could be a number of reasons why it actually starts to fail. The important thing is that you have the means to change it. We're gonna clean this out, make sure no old oil is left in here. Then we're gonna check for any cracks just in case, any bends, make sure that the sealing surface is nice and flat, and then I'll start putting the new gasket on. Alright, I finally have all the major parts of the gasket taken off. I'm not sure if it was baked on or if it had a layer of RTV down below, but it was really stuck on here. So I took all the main parts off. This is just some oil absorber that I have in a bucket laying around. I'm going to finish with a razor blade, scraping everything all around right here. And very self-explanatory, just grab the blade, clean it all up nice, try not to scratch it just to clean everything up. You can also use like a metal grinder wheel, or the metal, the little bristles to clean it up. Then after that, the brush wheel. After that, we're gonna make sure this is all nice and clean, use some degreaser, some brake cleaner, and I'll show you the next step with the new gasket. So I'm getting finished cleaning it right now. The oil pan was pretty dirty on the inside. I got all the gasket and RTV, or burnt gasket, whatever it was, taken off. Just to let you know, this is a B20 that I have swapped in here, same as any bottom end of B series, essentially for the oil pan at least, with the gasket changing process. But I'm mentioning this because I bought this off of JDM Orlando. We'll look at it here in Orlando, Florida, which they import motors from Japan, claiming about 60,000 miles, and the motors had, you know, no issues really. Little things here and there, like a valve cover gasket, changing the oil, pretty good maintenance. I cleaned it up right now, but there was almost like a buildup of what I thought was rust right over here on this part. I was kind of worried, but since it's an oil pan and there's oil constantly over there, I was kind of doubting that it was actually rust. So I hit it with a lot of degreaser, washed it outside, then used this soft brush, and it came off after a while. But what I think it was just a buildup of old gunk and old oil. So if you're getting a motor that's been sitting for a couple years, imported from somewhere else, I'm going to recommend that you at least do the oil pan gasket, valve cover gasket, and while you're down in the oil pan, you might as well just clean it up, make sure that everything's in order. I'm trying to get all the moisture out right now. I'm going to hit it with some brake clean, then I'll start putting the actual gasket itself. Well, I'll hit this with some brake clean, then I'll go on the engine side and start seeing if it's dirty or what I can do over there. But I want to make sure that the oil pan is good first. Just like we did before we sprayed down or took off the oil pan, we're going to spray down the engine because we don't want any oil being on the actual sealing surface when we put the gasket on. So we're going to do this a couple times, make sure everything's nice and dry, and get the surface ready for it. We've sprayed it down a couple times. As you can see, there's no real liquid residue left. Everything is getting nice and clean. The two spots that I told you to do RTV earlier, it's going to be right here. I'll get closer in a second. And on the adjacent side right there, it's behind two of the studs. And basically, this portion right here is part of the oil pump. As you can see, the oil pickup comes over here. And if you look really closely, there's that line where it mates with the oil pump mates with the block, and that's where you want to put a little dab of RTV or silicone sealant. So you want to make sure that there's no extra oil residue or anything. You see, I've already cleaned it a couple times and stuff still keeps on coming off. After that's done, we're gonna put those guides and start putting the pan on. Really, there's not much more to do from this. Just kind of bolt everything back together. Before we continue, sorry, forgot to mention, I showed you right here where the oil pump meets, that you have to put a dab of RTV. Same thing on the other side, you have the rear seal, and that goes onto a little plate, and it's gonna have a dab right there, and right there as well, and you can see the lines visibly in person, especially where exactly it's gonna go. So just where you see those 4 lines, that's where you're gonna put a little dab. We're gonna go ahead and open our Honda Bond or the silicone of your choice. Make sure your hands are nice and degreased. For example, mine are super dry right now because I just used brake clean, but it's always recommended to do gloves with this so you don't contaminate the RTV or the sealant or anything. Just gonna put a little bit right there and start putting the guides on so we can put the actual oil pan gasket. That should pretty much be all you need right there. A little dab right there, some right here, and then on this corner as well. That's gonna, crush when you put the gasket on and even itself out basically. And the rest is taken care of by the seal of the gasket. Got the gasket laid up there along with the guides. This is gonna just seat up against. It only goes on one way, so don't worry about it being upside down or whatever. Just make sure the curves and everything match up with the block itself. Once this is already hanging up there, you're gonna put your oil pan on and start bolting it back up. Alright, got the pan up there. It's being supported 100% by those guides. I'm going to start by putting the nuts on first, and then I'll put the bolts on, just so I can have it all set up correctly. There's one of the studs. Start by putting the nuts on, and we're going to do all these finger tight first, just so it seats up 100% against the block. Now that you have them all flush against the oil pan, you're gonna make sure they're all hand tight. And after that, or hand tight, it just means snug. Then you're gonna use your torque wrench and tighten it to 8 foot-pounds. And there is a sequence, so I'm going to attach a picture with the sequence. Okay, now we have everything torqued down over here. As you can see, there's no bulge anywhere because of the type of the gasket it is. I'm gonna go over to our Honda Bond and read the back. It says curing time, it's anywhere from 15 to 16 hours for full rubber-like consistency. Dry time is 15 minutes. So after you actually apply the RTV, you're gonna wanna make sure you have everything up and settled like this within those 15 minutes so it can start to dry together with the oil pan gasket and the oil pan itself. Now that this is done, we are going to put our new drain plug in, which I actually have a magnetic one I wanted to install while I was down here. And we are going to start spraying everything down with our brake cleaner just to make sure there's no oil built up anywhere that can fall into our exhaust and make us think that we're burning oil this time. After that's done, we're going to bring it down, put oil in it, and we'll put oil once it's dry, once the RTV is dry, and we should be good to go. Everything's all nice and clean now. Just gonna hit it with a little bit of black spray paint, make this look very nice, and start putting the header back on. Just like with anything, before you torque something down, you're gonna want to make sure that all the bolts and all the nuts are on, all snug, nothing's binding. Then you can actually start tightening everything. We're gonna do a reverse sequence. We're gonna put the nuts on first, just like we took it off last, and then we'll tighten down all the bolts. Okay, exhaust is back on, heat shield is back on, just got to connect it down below, lower the car, and you're pretty much set to go as long as you fill oil. thank you guys for watching this video. Hope it helped you out, and I hope you were able to do your oil pan gasket as easy as we were. It's really not that bad of a process, and as long as you have the right tools and the good mindset, you can be able to do this at home without any major problems. Okay guys, thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe, and always share our videos.